There is a carved register on a temple wall in Egypt that no general tour includes. 3 robed figures surround a dark, rough-edged mass of stone. Each figure holds a long rod directed at that stone, not raised above it, not parallel to the ground. Angled downward, gripped at the lower third of the shaft. That grip appears in 0 ceremonial depictions in the known Egyptian corpus. The museum catalog calls this a votive offering scene, new kingdom, ritual purification of sacred stone. But the hieroglyphic line carved directly beneath the figures, the line the published translation skips, does not say purification. The label says ritual. The stone says procedure. Look at that wall and consider the isolation of this specific carving within the temple complex. The dark mass at the center of the scene is not an altar. It is not a vessel. It is not a shrine, a sacred object on a plinth, or a god receiving an offering. It is raw stone, unworked. The carved surface shows an uneven, rough-edged texture, not the smooth finish of a consecrated object, not the polished surface of divine matter set aside for worship. It is granite in its pre-worked state. And the 3 figures surrounding it are not facing a god. They are facing the stone. That matters already. But it gets worse. Every genuine offering scene in the Egyptian painted and carved record contains 3 structural elements: an altar or sacred surface, a vessel or gift, and a divine recipient, a god, a pharaoh in deified form, or a sacred symbol serving as the receiver of the act. Remove any one of those 3, and you no longer have an offering scene. You have something else. This scene has none of them. No altar, no vessel, no divine receiver. What it has is a raw, dark mass and 3 directed rods. The official explanation requires you to accept 3 simultaneous absences, the 3 defining features of the category it claims the scene belongs to. The label survives only if you do not compare this scene to the corpus it is supposed to be part of. And most people never do compare. They read the label and keep walking. But then comes the line they always skip, the one hidden in the shadows below. Beneath the 3 figures, in the sub-register below the main carved scene, there is a line of hieroglyphic text. It is not damaged. It is not partially erased. It is not missing. The line is complete, legible, and has been present on that wall for 3,000 years. It was recorded in early expedition drawings. It was visible in the original survey documentation. It appears in at least 1 published catalog entry, transcribed but marked as formulaic, requires further study. No further study followed. The line was deferred and never returned to. If you translate that line using standard offering formula vocabulary, it becomes a liturgical phrase. Ritual purification language. That is how it has been rendered in the few instances where it has been acknowledged at all. But the rendering requires ignoring 3 specific sign clusters in the text that do not belong in liturgical formulae. The first cluster contains a phoneme group found in metallurgical texts, the group rendered as heat applied from without. Not internal divine warmth, not sacred fire. The phrase specifically used in descriptions of heat applied to a material from an external source. It appears in bronze working descriptions. It appears in glass working records. It does not appear in standard offering or purification formulae. The second cluster carries a liquid flow determinative, the determinative sign associated with molten or softened material moving under controlled conditions. This sign marks the flow of something that was solid and became temporarily workable. Not water poured in offering, not sacred liquid, softened material in motion. The third cluster ends the line with a form change determinative, a sign that appears in glass working descriptions, in records of material transformation, and in exactly 0 ritual offering texts. It means the thing becomes something different from what it was. Read together, in order, left to right. This line says, heat applied from without material, softens and flows, form is achieved. That is not a prayer. That is a process sequence. The line was not skipped because it was damaged. It was not omitted because it was unclear. It was translated into the available category ritual because no scholar working within standard Egyptological frameworks had a second category available. No one opened a drawer labeled procedure. So the line was filed under liturgy and left there, quietly, for decades, waiting for someone to notice that the determinatives used are not liturgical determinatives at all. They are craft determinatives, technical determinatives, the kind used when the text is describing what happens to a material during controlled manipulation. This is not a prayer carved on the wall. This is a caption. Now go back to the figures. Look at the geometry of the scene as a whole. The three figures are equidistant from the stone mass, not in a processional arrangement which would show them moving toward a divine space, not in a supplicant arrangement which would show them oriented toward a receiver higher than themselves. They are spaced in a working formation triangulated around a central object at equal angles from it. The rods they hold are not raised in presentation. They are directed downward at the stone's surface, and the tips of all three rods converge at approximately the same point. One convergence point. Three directed rods. Equal spacing. This is not a decorative arrangement. It is a functional one. The formation maintains angular symmetry around a central node. In any engineering or physics context, that arrangement has a name. But you are not supposed to see this as an engineering scene. The label says ritual, so most people never look at the geometry. The camera should hold here, the convergence point. Three rod tips directed at one location on a raw granite surface, and the line below says heat, flow, form change. What process would this describe? Granite contains quartz. That is not alternative theory, that is mineralogy. Quartz is a piezoelectric material. When mechanical stress or vibration is applied to quartz, it generates an internal electrical charge and produces heat at the grain boundaries. This is documented physics. When three sources of vibration converge at a single node in a quartz-bearing crystalline material, the internal heat generated at that convergence point is significantly greater than what any single source alone would produce. At sufficient intensity and at specific resonant frequencies matched to the crystalline structure of the material, the surface at that node becomes tractable, not molten, not dissolved, temporarily workable at a grain boundary level that no conventional abrasive tool can replicate. The field is called thermoacoustic resonance. It is not fringe. It sits in materials, science, literature. Modern laboratories have demonstrated that focused acoustic energy applied to crystalline surfaces produces measurable changes in surface tractability. Cymatics experiments have shown for decades that sound at specific frequencies reorganizes matter into precise geometric patterns. At higher intensities, the same principle moves, displaces, and restructures granular and crystalline surfaces. The scale achieved in modern laboratory settings is small, but the principle is real. It is documented. It is not invented by alternative researchers. It is sitting in physics papers. The ancient scene shows three convergent rods directed at a single node on a raw granite mass. The text beneath the scene describes heat, applied from without, material flow, and form achieved. The sequence matches the observable stages of thermoacoustic surface treatment. Resonance generates heat at the convergence node. The surface material becomes workable. The desired form is cut or shaped. Modern science does not prove the ancient machine. It proves the principle is real, and the wall describes it in order, not a ritual formation, a working formation, not three worshippers facing a god, three operators managing a convergence node, not a prayer carved beneath the scene. A process sequence described using the only vocabulary available to a civilization that understood the effect without having a modern physics lexicon for it. Not scepters, resonance transmission rods, not offering, procedure. This is the part that should be uncomfortable, not because it requires extraordinary ancient technology hidden from history, because it requires something simpler and harder to dismiss. That a technical process was depicted on a temple wall and then mislabeled so thoroughly, in catalog after catalog and translation after translation, that the mislabeling has never been corrected. And someone did notice. That is the part the story does not often reach. The early expedition drawing of this register is available in the published record. The lower subregister is clearly visible in the drawing. The full scene is rendered. The text line is present and legible. The published expedition note labels the scene ritual, unspecified offering. The text line is transcribed. Then comes the footnote, lower text formulaic, requires further study. The deferral stands. No follow-up study appears in any subsequent publication connected to the same source. The file stayed open. No one returned to close it. A later photographic catalog entry for the scene exists. The photograph included in that entry is cropped. The upper scene, the three figures, the rods, the stone is shown. The lower register, where the text line sits, falls below the crop line. The entry describes the scene as a purification ritual with scepter bearers. The text that calls it a process is not in frame. At least one academic paper on Egyptian stoneworking methods references this scene in a footnote. The footnote notes that the rod grip is atypical for a ceremonial context. The word atypical appears once. The paper's argument continues without returning to the image. No follow-up paper takes the footnote further. The observation exists, it is published, and it simply stops. The archive does not deny the clue. It categorizes it into harmlessness. The scene sits under ritual offering iconography in the catalog, not under craft process imagery, not under tool use depictions, not under workshop scenes. That classification determines which researchers encounter it. Engineers do not search the ritual offering catalog. Physicists do not search the purification formula index. The one line that reads as a technical sequence is indexed under funerary transformation imagery, a category searched by death ritual scholars, not materials scientists. The evidence is not destroyed. It is filed where the wrong people will find it. And the original wall is not as accessible as it once was. The section of the complex containing this register now requires a research permit for close photographic access. General photography in the area captures the upper scene. The lower register where the text sits falls into shadow at standard camera angles. From the tourism path, you see the figures. You do not see the line. Not hidden, available, accessible to the right credential, but the credential routes to the catalog, and the catalog says ritual, so the circle stays closed. Go back to the first image. 3 figures, 3 rods, 1 raw granite mass. The convergence point at the center, the text line beneath it, legible, complete, present. Describing in sequence the stages of a process that modern acoustic physics can describe in a laboratory and cannot yet replicate at the scale those sarcophagus interiors imply was once possible. The official explanation may still account for the broader scene. New Kingdom workshops depicted craftsmen. Sacred materials were shown in ritual contexts. Scepter bearers appear in hundreds of registers across dozens of temples. The general framework is defensible. But not the grip, not the 3 structural absences, not the text line with the metallurgical phoneme cluster, the liquid flow determinative, and the form change sign that appears nowhere in the ritual formula corpus. Not the convergence geometry, not the footnote no one followed, not the cropped photograph, not the misfiled index entry. None of those details fit the label. And none of them are damaged, missing, or ambiguous. They are right there. They have been right there. Sitting in the survey, in the catalog, in the drawing, and on the wall itself, in complete legible stone, the alternative reading does not require believing in alien architects or pre-flood super-civilizations. It requires something more uncomfortable than both. That a technical process was discovered, refined, used, and then described on a wall in the only vocabulary available: sacred, ritual, ceremonial vocabulary. Because those craftsmen did not have physics, they had results, and they carved the procedure down so no one would lose it. The theory does not close the case, but it explains what the official reading avoids. The official reading explains the frame. The alternative reading explains the detail. And the detail is what the official reading has been quietly stepping around for as long as this wall has been in a catalog. The scene is still there. The grip is still at the lower third. The 3 figures are still equidistant around the convergence node. The subregister text is still complete, legible, and describing heat, flow, and form change in that sequence with craft determinatives. The ritual formula category was never designed to hold. The catalog still says ritual. The index still routes to funerary transformation. The photograph is still cropped above the line. The footnote still reads, requires further study. And the label still says ritual. The determinatives still say procedure. And the line is still complete.